So I'll move over here to the next track two, the multi-state innovative energy resilience initiative that is being coordinated through the FEMA BRIC program. I have to say, I've been engaged in this as probably one of the most innovative mitigation projects that I've certainly been working through the AHC, along with private sector, along with states, and moving this forward within the BRIC process. But to move that on, then I will transfer this over to the moderator, Darrell Donnell, as owner of DTE Consultant, as well as former director of the Homeland Security and Homeland Security and Emergency Management of the District of Columbia. Darrell, I'll turn it over to you and get your panel started.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. And thank you to the All Hazards Consortium, AHC, for having me on today and moderating this panel. As John said, this is we think a really innovative program that really speaks to some of the resilience and some of the things that were discussed in the previous panel. This multi-state innovative energy resilience initiative that we're trying to undertake under the BRIC program. We actually call it the Green Energy Power on Demand Solution, or GPOD, and we'll get into a little bit more about what that means. But joining me on the panel today are John Northam, the Deputy State Coordinator for Disaster Services, the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. John, if you could just introduce yourself real quick and just say a couple things about your position.
Yeah, thanks, Darrell. Good afternoon, everybody. As Darrell said, John Northam with Virginia Department of Emergency Management, the Disaster Services Bureau. We basically have a lot of the response programs, so our hazmat, search and rescue, logistics, those functions, and then also our regional staff. So Virginia is divided up into 7 geographical regions, and we have regional staff out in each region. And so, that's our main interaction with the local governments and local emergency managers. So that's basically my function is to kind of oversee that, provide the right top cover for our division directors, and usually just get out of their way because they all do an excellent job.
Hey, thanks, John. And also on the panel was Dave Vanderblumen, who is the principal for DV Consulting LLC and also the former operations executive for Dominion Energy. Dave?
Yeah, good morning, Darrell and John, Gus. Glad to be here with you. As Darrell mentioned, I'm Dave Vanderblumen, 42 years at Dominion Energy in various individual contributor and leadership positions. I retired in 2019 as the director of the Regional Operations Centers and Emergency Preparedness. Since 2019, I've been doing consulting on the side and working with All Hazards Consortium. And Tom Moran asked me to join this team and help as a liaison between the electric and the public sector and keep this process moving forward.
Thanks, Dave. And then finally, also on the panel, we have Gus Johnson, who is the Director, Electrical Distribution and Grid Solutions with Dominion Energy. Gus?
Hey, Darrell, Dave, John, good afternoon. Gus Johnson with Dominion Energy. I'm Director of Electric Distribution, Grid Solutions. My organization is responsible for a bunch of stuff within our distribution organization, primarily on the grid edge. So our smart meter and AMI deployments, our Smart Cities initiative. And the reason why I'm here today is for our DER integration and strategy, primarily revolving around the integration of third-party generators and distributed energy resources on our distribution grid in Virginia and North Carolina. And then also things like our electric school bus project and some of the things that we're doing with vehicle to grid, mobile storage, which is what we're here to talk about today, and then also some stationary storage initiatives as we look to hit some of the targets that have been outlined in the recently passed Virginia Clean Economy Act. Good to be here. Good to see everyone.
Thank you, Gus, and thanks again to John and Dave. Before we get started, what I want to do is, we've had some technical difficulties today, and we wanted to do a poll. But if you could just very briefly in the chat, put a thumbs up, say yes or no. 2 quick questions I'd like to throw out at you all before we get started. One, have you heard of BRIC? Again, that's Building resilience, and infrastructure in communities? And two, do you have any BRIC projects ongoing? I know there are a lot of private sector folks on the call, but I also know there's, I think probably about 50% state and local. So again, if you could just respond to those questions. There's the first one, yes and no. Thanks, Ron. I could leave it to you to have two answers to that, but I'm assuming that's yes to the first, no to the second. So as we're doing that, and it looks like a lot of you do have some familiarity with it, but just to kind of give you a brief introduction of what is the FEMA BRIC program. The Building and Resilient Infrastructure and Community program aims to categorically shift the federal focus away from reactive disaster spending and towards research-supported, proactive investment in community resilience. Examples of BRIC projects are ones that demonstrate innovative approaches to partnerships, such as shared funding mechanisms and/or project design. For example, an innovative project may bring multiple funding sources or in-kind resources from a range of private and public sector partners. It may offer multiple benefits to a community in addition to the benefit of risk reduction, excuse me. Through BRIC, FEMA continues to invest in a variety of mitigation activities, and the focus is really on infrastructure projects and what FEMA refers to as community lifelines, of which there are 7: safety and security, food, water, and shelter, health and medical, energy, communications, transportation, and hazardous materials. Our focus of the project that we're doing really focuses on energy, and we think it meets some of the criteria that I just talked about, with about an innovative approach, partnerships with the private sector, different multiple funding streams using direct grants and so on, but also in-kind payments that we utilize the expertise from experts in these areas. With that, what I'd like to do is sort of, if I could start with you, John, could you just sort of lay out what the purpose, the focus, and the scope of this project is, and exactly what type of problem that VDEM is attempting to solve with this project?
Sure. So without getting too technical, basically we want to be able to provide electrical power when we've got an extended power outage, and focusing on communities that are most in need. And so you'll hear me talk about kind of putting everything through that equity lens in those traditionally underserved communities, and be able to, I heard the previous discussion talking about generators. This really becomes another tool in the toolbox, if you will, and another option of being able to get, mobile battery packs to a facility, to get that facility up and running and get some power to them for an extended period of time while the utility companies are working through restoring power. You probably saw on Virginia was in the news early in the month. I-95 was shut down. We had some extended power outages due to a snowstorm that came through, and there were people that were without power, going on 4 to 5 days, and that starts to generate a lot of phone calls to the power companies, a lot of phone calls to the emergency managers. So what we're hoping here is, if we've got that capability to get power up and running to serve communities that need it the most, and to be able to either warming shelters, skilled nursing facilities. It could be a grocery store. It could be a local Dollar General, right? Something that's going to help that community get through until that power is restored. That's really what the overall goal of the project is, to be able to do that. And not just do it in one community, but do it in multiple communities, because we're looking at a wide scale, long-term power outage, and really trying to mitigate the effects of that.
Thanks, John. John, listening to your response, it sounds as if what you're really trying to do is get to those underserved communities, those most critical facilities, that critical infrastructure that you really need to keep up and running. And you talked about mobile battery packs and things like that. That's a little bit different than microgrids and those different types of things. Gus or Dave, can you want to expand on that and really talk about what makes that different than, say, a microgrid, what we're attempting to do here?
Yeah, I can take that one. So a microgrid are stationary assets, and they are installed in and around a community, a set of buildings, a campus, et cetera, permanently to provide power, to those facilities either in blue sky days, or they're also capable of detaching from the grid should there be an extended outage, and kind of work in what's called an islanding mode, where they're completely separated from the grid and completely self-sustainable. What we're talking about here are non-stationary assets, so mobile storage, either storage on wheels, on trailers, things that would be pre-deployed ahead of major events and hooked into these buildings that don't currently have backup generation, just in case their power goes out. And if the power goes out, then this energy pack would kick on and would sustain them for some duration of time. So I think that's really the main difference between the two. Also, we're primarily focused on energy storage here. A microgrid can have any number of things associated with it. It could be solar, it could be mini wind turbines, it could be energy storage, it could be traditional generation. There could be a lot of parts and pieces, including building controls to help control the load and lower the load and balance things out when you're in that islanding condition to have it last the most amount of time for critical services. So those are really the differences between a microgrid and the mobile storage, which is what we're here to discuss today.
Thanks for that, Dave. I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay. Gus, go ahead, please.
Oh, I did.
Gus, are you there?
I just did. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, yeah, I just went through microgrids. Did you not hear any of that?
No, I think Dave was actually speaking, so you must have had some technical problems and we didn't hear you.
Okay.
Oh, we got it.
Okay. Yeah, no.
We heard you. We heard you, Gus. We heard you.
Oh,
We heard your response.
okay. Okay.
Oh, okay. I did not. Well, maybe I'm having technical problems. I did not hear that. I think what I heard from Dave was you had talked about, this technology can be used during blue sky days and dark days and things like that. Can you kind of delve into that technology a little bit more and how that works and what you all envision moving forward?
Gus, if you want, I'll try to answer them. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Dave, I can hear you. I can jump in as needed as well.
Okay. I think what's cool about this solution is it addresses resiliency in two areas. One, from a day-to-day perspective, to what Gus was talking about, energy storage can be used when in the concept of it is that you can store energy when generation is available, but loads might not need it. So, solar power is great during the daytime, wind blows whenever wind wants to blow. But electricity is kind of unique in the fact that you need it when you need it. So part of the key to balancing that load profile and balancing that equation as you put more and more renewable energy onto the system is be able to store energy, excess energy when it's available, and then use it when it's at its peak to help you, curtail some investments you might make, but helps balance that out and makes it a whole lot easier to folks that we call system operators. From a community, so that helps your system be more resilient. Then from a community perspective, critical facilities are prioritized in the restoration process. However, that location on that restoration process is typically key is to where they're located on the grid. So if you're really close to the substation or the source, you get restored fairly quickly. If you're out the end of the line, it takes a little bit longer to be restored. So no matter if you're, a hospital, a 911 center, where you're located on that grid will determine, when you're going to be restored a little bit towards that. What's neat about these things is that they can be detached from the grid and they can be moved to locations that may be a little bit longer on that restoration curve. And when you talk about the underserved and maybe the underprivileged areas, they typically or may most likely be located further out of that grid or out in remote areas, and they don't have the dollars or the resources to make investments to put in standby generation. And when you're looking at the size of the batteries we're talking about, if you had to replicate that with a standalone generator at that facility, I mean, a 1 megawatt or 1,000 kW generator can be anywhere up to $250,000 and another $200,000 just to install it at a facility. So you're talking about $400,000 just to put it at one facility. And then you got the ongoing maintenance for each one of those, making sure they run. And I don't know how many of you all own portable generators. You can be like me. I bought one when I first moved out to the country. And when I first bought it, I started that thing once a month religiously. And then as I lived here longer and longer, it'd be once every 2 months, once every 3 months. And then maybe you don't use it for a year, and the day that you need it, you're wondering, Don, I wonder if that thing's going to run or be available. Nice thing about these is they're in use every day at the utility. And then when you need them, you unplug them and you take them out to that facility. So the maintenance piece of it goes away, that headache goes away for that end user. And to be able to move it around, I think helps offset those initial investment that you'd have to make to replicate this at a site-by-site location. So that's what I think really helps these underserved and underprivileged locations.
So it sounds as if what we're really talking about here is a project that reduces mitigation costs, that's scalable, that's flexible, and those different types of things, if I'm understanding what you and Gus are saying. Is that correct?
Yes.
Ability part of it. As we've seen, and some of the recent winter storms that we've had, it hits certain areas of the system. So having these units and being able to move them around to where the trouble is, I think is really important. So you're not just spending money, dropping assets in the ground, and they're just there. They can only be used there. You can move these things around. One other thing that I forgot to mention is that we're not using these for outage mitigation and restoration efforts. They'll be aggregated at a Dominion facility, and they can be further used to support the grid. So the idea of ongoing cycling of these things, ongoing maintenance, ongoing usage of them to support the grid, I think is an added value here. So yes, it is outage mitigation and restoration efforts in underserved portions of our communities, but there also is a larger grid benefit by aggregating them when they're in storage, so they're not just sitting around not doing anything.
And John, as the state coordinator for disaster services, how does this help you all in your planning and your mitigation efforts? In fact, how does it, in terms of the 5 planning mechanisms of preparedness of response, prevention, response, mitigation, recovery, and so on, how does this help you and your team do the job that you're supposed to do?
Well, kind of like I said earlier, it gives us another option, right? Another solution to getting to folks, kind of that back to normal and restoring and recovering after the disaster. It also really helps us, really, COVID. And I hate to go back to COVID, right? Because we're all kind of sick of talking about it, but COVID highlighted the need for health equity, and then because that was something that was sort of discussed. But we never really practiced that in our pandemic plans and our exercises, right? And then after this hit, we kind of threw all those to the shredder and started over. But we really started focus on health equity. Well, health equity then got us to look through disasters in general through that equity lens. And so we really had to put that into practice during COVID. As we were looking at alternate care facilities and community vaccination centers, we started realizing we got educated on access and functional needs. How do we get everyone into that alternate care facility? How do we get everyone into that CVC? And both of those are really subsets of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so VDEM, Virginia Department of Emergency Management, we now have a diversity, equity, and inclusion office. And so, and I kind of look at that like a safety office, right? It's everyone's responsibility, but then you have a couple of experts to kind of guide everyone. And so this project really helps us meet that diversity, equity, and inclusion goal of serving those traditionally underserved communities or marginalized communities by looking through this BRIC project with that equity lens. We developed during COVID the list of vulnerable communities within Virginia, and I can go on a whole kind of methodology and how that was done. But at the end of the day, we have a list of our most vulnerable communities. And working with the local governments and with the local emergency managers, we have an idea of where we want to start and where we want to employ this capability. First to kind of function test it, but then grow it. And I think that really helps, right? Because the question is always going to be, well, okay, you've got this really great technology and this really great capability. Where do you start? Well, starting with that equity lens. To me is the right thing to do, and not just we know the localities, right? So a local jurisdiction, but then we also need to know the hyper-local areas in an actual community or a cul-de-sac or a neighborhood that is typically impacted. So we're honing that skill and getting better at that every day. So this really helps us get down to that very local level, help kind of decide where we want to deploy these resources to. And, VDEM in coordination with the local governments, we get to decide where that stuff goes. And it's going to be like anything, it's going to be a limited resource, right? We can't put it everywhere, but we certainly will have the ability to prioritize based on vulnerability and based on impact on where we want to put this. So it really does help us achieve that equity goal to really help serve those marginalized communities and the communities that don't have the resources. The example of $250,000 for a generator, then the maintenance and the upkeep. If we can do this, that really takes a lot of that burden off those communities, takes the pressure off the public works and off the emergency manager, and potentially off the fire department and EMS that might have to go out and do welfare checks because you've had people without power for 7, 8, 9 days and you haven't heard from someone. So it really does. The technology piece is a really cool thing to talk about, but it really helps us achieve that equity goal in a fairly direct way. It's not, it's pretty easy to connect those dots, I think.
Oh, thanks, John. And you really touched on what was really going to be my next question, was really talking about the project participants and each of your organization's involvement. And I think you really articulated that very well with VDEM, determining what those critical sites were, making sure that you had a good handle on the equity lens, your underserved communities, and those different types of things. From a design development perspective and things like that, Gus, can you touch on Dominion Energy's involvement and really sort of go beyond some of the technical things that you and David discussed earlier, and really what the involvement of Dominion Energy will be in this project?
Sure. So we have been looking at different types of energy storage, different applications for energy storage for a while now. And mobile storage has been on our radar for a while. I have an engineer who's been working on this effort, looking at the technologies, looking at the ease of deployment, how we can get them out there, get them connected quickly, and then also developing geospatial tools to evaluate each site to see whether we even have room for these units, how will we get them in there. So, we already have a pretty good foundation laid for evaluation, getting the storage technology out there. And I think that's the role that we play in this. It's, let's develop a list of sites. Let's go and do a feasibility study on them. Let's see if we can hook them up. Let's see if they even have the parking lot space to sit and site these things, when they actually need them. So this way we take our list of potentials and we can actually distill them down to actuals, doing a level of engineering and technical analysis. So that's really our role in this, is technical evaluation, looking at the needs of the grid, looking at the needs of the area, looking at how feasible it is to get these things interconnected.
All right, thank you for that. Another key partner in this is the All Hazards Consortium, AHC, and I know he's not a part of the panel, but Tom Moran, are you still on?
Hey, Daryl.
Yeah. Hey, Tom, if you could just talk a little bit about the involvement of AHC and how it works. And part of this, for those of you who may not be familiar with BRIC, is BRIC grants, and really a lot of the FEMA grants is that they require a match. And in this particular grant, it requires a 25% match. And so, Tom, could you talk about a little bit about the AHC involvement and how AHC helps generate that 25% match, and then also how AHC is really, and Dominion for that matter, are working together to alleviate some of the burden of VDEM in preparing this BRIC grant?
Sure. Well, on the prep component, we knew VDEM, like every other state, is kind of nose down on their key projects, and they don't have spare writers and people laid around, right? And so we kind of knew from the catastrophic planning grant, which took place between 2008 and 2014. At that time, for those, Daryl was the director at Homeland Security, and they expanded the National Capital Region to include 6 states. It was millions of dollars. And so Daryl was responsible for the match from all these other states. And Daryl called me and he said, "Hey, Tom, look, I need help generating this match, figure it out, click." And so we got about 45 private sector companies together, and they came up with ways to do this. We submitted that to states and they approved it. And so we also realized, hey, we got a lot of people we could ask to help write the grant, to go do the research and do all that stuff the state didn't have to do. So we learned from 2008 to 14, we can develop match through a number of ways: in kind, meetings, cash. There's a lot of ways we can do it. As a matter of fact, for that grant, if I'm not mistaken, we were way over 25% because we developed a system to do that. And the states loved it. They didn't have to mess with it. We took care of it all right out of the normal procurement and meetings process. It really worked really well. FEMA approved it, not in writing, but verbally. They gave us the nod to proceed. They thought it was very innovative. So when BRIC came out, we got a call from one of our board members saying, "Hey, we're going to blow the dust off the BRIC match program or the FEMA match program." We did. So we got hold of Virginia and said, "Hey, listen, we have an idea. If we could bring our own resources, would you guys be willing to submit a program or submit a grant for this?" And then we went back with a couple of utilities, and Dominion actually stepped forward. And they said, "Yeah, we're in." So we were able to muster the private sector resources to bring the band of brothers and sisters together to do the work, the hard work, and then coordinate with VDEM to submit the grant. And hopefully it was a light lift for VDEM. We got a chance to innovate, and we got a chance to keep working. In a normal window after you submit, there's a 6-8 month dead space, right? And so we can continue working and doing the messaging like we're doing now. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to leverage everybody's resources on the same project, right? That was the whole idea. Let's not spend money different ways. Let's put it together, public and private, into a similar process. And it was really a great match. And we plan to expand that going forward here. But our role was really to help bring the team to do the writing for the state where they would approve it, everything like that, work together with us to bring the match. I mean, all of it, right? Which we could do because we've done millions and millions of dollars in match generation in the past. And I think, Daryl, I think somebody said it. This is one of the most innovative things I've seen in a long time. And I think in a public-private partnership, when that trust is built, these are the kinds of things that can come out of that, right? We're all we're doing is provide that platform for them to come together and work under protection of FOIA, right? Because nobody wants the media involved, nobody wants external players, and the consortium provides that legal umbrella to do that. And then it's just based on partnerships and trust.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that, Tom. That's a really good summation of the AHC role. And some of you may be wondering, and Mark Slaughter, I'm going to get to your question here in a second, but I think, we started off saying that this was a multi-state innovative energy resilience project. And some of you may be wondering why just the state of Virginia is on here. Well, we've had discussions with other states, and for various reasons, we're sort of taking the crawl, walk, run approach, working with Virginia first. And we eventually, really believe that there will be other states that are involved in this, and potentially other energy companies and things like that. As most things, you have to have that sort of that proof of concept. So we've had discussions. FEMA Region 3, if I'm not mistaken, has been briefed on this project. They've been very receptive to what we're doing. So we really are very optimistic that in the future there will be other states involved. And so, Rosemarie, hopefully that addresses your question. And then in the chat, Mark, I think this question is for John Northam, if I'm not mistaken. Virginia is one of a handful of states with its own flood observation and warning system. How does or might that system contribute to infrastructure or community resilience? So Mark, I think you're directing that question to John Northam, correct?
Yeah, I'm gonna assume that that's for me. So
Yeah.
so we do have iFlows. It is one of our, right now it's a pretty high priority. It's been, I'll say for lack of a better term, it's been a little bit neglected and it's old technology. So the way that it was designed isn't necessarily the way it's functioning, but we're certainly working on that. It does contribute to, it's really contributing to preparedness and making sure that we can, that warning, the W and I flow stands for warning, right? So localities can make decisions on evacuations and things of that nature, but then also collecting the data, to examine your floodplains and things of that nature. So that's kind of contributing to the infrastructure piece. I hope that answers the question. I don't really have all the iFlows notes in front of me, but that's definitely a big project for us.
Thanks, John. I'll see. So I have been asked to sort of, we were scheduled to go until 4:30 with this session, but we're kind of back off track on time. So I've been asked to wrap this up around 4:25. So we've got about 4:17 right now by my clock. And I think we pretty much addressed a lot of this. Is that really this is a project to really take a look at some critical infrastructure that has to be up to supplement what the power companies are doing to get power up for everyone, but making sure some of these critical facilities are up and running, grocery stores, data centers, those different types of things. And again, these are some of the things that VDEM has already mapped out in conjunction with working with Dominion and really recognizing these are the areas that they want to try to use this technology. Again, we think it's going to be something that's scalable, that's going to be flexible and really provide another tool in the toolkit for John and his team to use as they're dealing with these types of emergencies. John had alluded to the I-95 situation that they had in Virginia in the national capital area several weeks ago as being one example where this is something that really could have been used, where folks were out of power for 4 or 5 days, and those different types of things, and not in addition to what was happening on 95. But the other part of it is, and I think some of you may have heard some of the earlier sessions with FEMA officials, where there really is a focus on making sure some of these underserved communities in rural areas, urban areas, that unfortunately, historically, have not been as served completely as some of the other areas. And so that's a big emphasis. And we think that this project is something that can really address that. We've got about 5 more minutes, about 6 more minutes. So we can open this up to questions or closing comments from you, John, Dave, and or Gus.
I'll go first, I suppose, for closing comments. One, we're excited about this project, and we appreciate the assistance and help from the consortium to get this rolling. Tom alluded to the trust piece, and so eventually where the rubber meets the road is at that local level. And so it's going to be the messaging and the coordination with the local emergency managers, because like I said, it's not going to be deployed everywhere, so someone's going to feel left out. But if we constantly work on building those relationships and that trust every day, and if everybody understands what we're doing and why we're trying to do it, that's going to go a long way in the success of this program.
Thanks, John. I just one of the things that I apologize I failed to mention that there's 3 phases. This is an overall 3-year phase project that we're working on, and I don't know, from the technical pieces of that, Dave, do you want to kind of speak to that, of those phases that we'll be going through over this 3-year period?
Yeah, obviously the first phase we're talking about is the scoping project, where we will work to lay out all the details of what the technology looks like, what the interface looks like, what it's going to take to get them hooked up, the locations, the processes that it takes, how do you get them from point A to point B? How does the state identify it? How do they notify the power company to get them there? That'll all happen. Those details will be worked out in phase 1, which will be 2022, 2023. Phase 2 will be to take that information and go into a proof of concept, if you will, where we'll ask to purchase several of these units through the BRIC program, get a couple of these batteries on site, pre-wire a couple of selected locations that we work through with the with this with VDM, and then work it through a year to see how adaptive and any tweaks that we need to go to the processes. And then phase 3 would be to infiltrate the system with many of these units, locate them across the enterprise and be able to take this and do it at a larger scale. And at the same time, hopefully we're reaching out to other states and other utilities. We will now have if you will, a blueprint on how to do this, what the devices need to look like, an idea of what the processes could look like, where it can be leveraged across multiple states and multiple utilities, and we can really make an impact on the communities.
Yeah, thanks, David. And I apologize. That was a very important piece, that three-year phase process. So really important for you all to understand that and know a little bit about it. Gina, I see your question. Are all of the states and regions have the same criteria from the BRIC, even though all the regions have special circumstances? I think there are some basic criteria that you have to have for the BRIC for this type. FEMA is really looking for innovative projects. They're really looking for multi-partner projects. There's a 25% match that has to go into this. Those are some basic baseline things that all states are required to do. But to your point about different special circumstances, I think that's really unique to the project that you're trying to put in place. And as you're working with that, as we've seen working with John and his team at VDEM, they've really done a good job of educating us on what their special circumstances may be. And so as we've approached this and written a grant, we've taken those into consideration. But again, there are some basic things. If you really want to know more about this, you could go to the FEMA website to learn more about BRIC. And then you could also go to the bricmatch.org. That's the AHC website, where we have just a great deal of information on that process and how it works. So just another place where you can get information. So I think we've got about a minute left. John just had his closing comments. Dave, Gus, anything else you'd like to add before we close out here?
No, just we're really excited about this effort and the possibilities of what we can do with mobile storage in terms of serving communities that don't currently have access and can sometimes be subject to extended outages. So this is important work, but it's also really exciting for me as a little bit of a geeky engineer too, to be able to do something like this. So appreciate everyone working on this. Appreciate the opportunity to share this with everyone as well.
From my perspective, I think having worked 42 years in the private sector and working with All Hazards and other organizations, I think this is really a unique opportunity for me to be able to work with both the public and the private sector and bring those two organizations together and on a project that benefits everybody. So it's really cool to be part of.
All right, thank you. Thanks, John, Dave, Gus. I appreciate you all. Tom, thank you for jumping in unannounced. And with that, we are ending on time. It's back to you, Mr. Molnar.
Thank you very much. And again, Daryl, Dave, John, and again, I won't repeat it. Thanks a lot. Again, the innovativeness here is the working together between states and private sector, which is really what this is about. And the relationships that I think we spoke about throughout the whole day, I think are apparent within this project here. So anyways, I won't harp any further. We'll move this forward, but thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate all your help.